passion, I mean, it's funny because passion doesn't really fit into that, really. Passions are the things that you just like to do. You know, I used to tell my kids, passions are the things that you wake up early to do or you stay up late to do. And that when you hit a bump in the road, you still do it anyway. You know, like you still want to keep doing it, even if it's hard.
So you're saying purpose work is sort of like an idea that's so big that, and so important that discomfort is kind of maybe not irrelevant, but isn't a distraction from what you're trying to do for purpose, you know, with purpose. And a passion project is a little bit more of the things that you feel good about in the moment, but don't necessarily add up to a larger something larger than you.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think passion is probably, as you talk about it, I think about it, it's probably more personal exploration. Passion is about exploring the things you're good at. Passion, those things are good. I think your passions have to serve your purpose.
In the final episode of this season of The Interesting Lives of Normal People, a season focused on passion projects, it's fitting that we wrap it up talking about how passions can help steer someone towards their purpose. In this episode, we talk with Segun Olagunju, or Shegs as he's commonly known. Shegs migrated to the US from Nigeria when he was really young.
I always told myself privately, which you all probably be the first to hear this, but I've always thought of myself a bit of as a Daniel, right? That I didn't have a choice moving to America. Nobody asked me, as I often say. And I always wrestle with identity, like, why am I here? Like, I'm not American enough. Kids always picking on me. Kids tell me to go back home to Africa. And then when I went to visit, you know, like my sophomore year in college, you know, they would be like, you know, you know, it was very clear that I didn't belong there either, right? You know, they would try to scam me and scheme me, you know, because I was talking with an accent. I was dressed like someone different. And this idea of like going back home and being of value and offering something back home has just been in my heart for a long time. I've always felt Nigerian, even though I haven't been there for so long.
Ever since he can remember, he's felt that his purpose is to help the continent of Africa thrive. He's had all sorts of jobs, but most notably, he worked for the African Leadership Academy, or ALA, a prestigious leadership academy in South Africa. We'll talk a lot more about this organization, but to add some context, it's there that Shegs met our co-host, Ryan Finley. Shegs' story is one of detours and the unexpected places and sometimes steps backwards that passions and purpose can take someone. Shegs also drills into the importance of humility if someone is to really stay true to their winding path that leads to their purpose. It's our hope that Segun's story is one that will beg the question in all of us: what's my purpose? And what am I doing to drive towards that purpose? Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the podcast that currently does not have a name.
Cake Show.
J-Cast.
Nope.
Is it Cake Show or Cake Show?
It's neither, so
The Cake
knock
Cast.
it off. All right.
Cake Pod. Cake Cast.
Nope.
Cake Cast.
Cake. For anybody who's listening, cake rhymes with Jake, so it's very stupid.
Yeah, you definitely need to say for anyone who's listening.
Yeah. I guess
To sort through the people who are listening and the people who are not presently listening.
Right.
That's good.
Obviously. Anyway, today we are joined by Segun Olagunju, a good friend of. I've actually just met Segun in this conversation, so I'm very excited to talk with you, Segun. I know that you've known the Ryans for a really long time, and kind of looking at some of your background, you've done a lot of really cool things and have a lot of experiences worldwide, internationally, and just a lot of conversation I know that we can have. So we are super pumped that you've decided to join us and chat with us today.
Thank you.
Welcome to the
Shegs.
show.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure to be with you all.
Shegs, if you had to give yourself, first question, if you had to kind of give yourself a kind of a tagline, is there a way that you would kind of describe yourself either professionally or personally?
Yeah, actually, the tagline that I'm using a lot in my resume these days is a serial social entrepreneur.
There's a lot there. Okay.
Maybe start with defining intrapreneur.
Yeah, I didn't know it was maybe just pronouncing it differently.
Intrapreneur. It's opposite.
That's my Nigerian accent.
Yeah.
Entrepreneur, eh? You don't know about entrepreneurs.
I don't want to be rude.
Intra. Yeah. No, it's actually
Okay.
it's an interesting idea. I mean, the concept is, I'm not sure where it's from, but the idea is that you can be entrepreneurial within an existing entity, right? And so oftentimes we only think about entrepreneurship or using those skills of entrepreneurship within the startup context, right? And so you can start up things, you can create things, you can drive new creations, new innovations, new inventions within existing entities. And that's really where I tend to find myself, is kind of that second follower type.
Maybe before we get into kind of what some of the things that you are doing or have done, could you give us more of a background? Just like, where are you from? How did you get to be where in some of the spheres of influence that you have now?
So I was born in Nigeria. I was born in Kaduna, which is northern Nigeria. My people are from the southwest, however, so in what we call Yoruba land. So my people are Yoruba, one of the three major people groups in Nigeria. And so I grew up there till I was 7, moved to Delaware. Delaware, spent my education, elementary, middle school, and high school. Then I left Delaware because, who doesn't? And I went to North Carolina for school, studied business at UNC, Chapel Hill, go Heels. And actually Chapel Hill was quite a significant season in my life. Actually, as we talk about the topic of sort of passion or direction or purpose, I had a couple of really seminal moments, experiences in college that shifted, I think, the trajectory of my life. But ultimately, after college, I ended up joining a nonprofit called Campus Crusade for Christ. They were, I'd actually been involved with a ministry called the Impact Movement, which was basically Campus Crusade for Christ for Black kids. And we started it on our campus, me and a friend. We started the first Bible study and grew that ultimately into like a, running group, and got really involved with that. And they were looking for people to help kind of spin this ministry out into its own entity, separate from Crusade, or Crew as it's called now. And so I ended up moving down to Orlando, Florida as a missionary for my first job. I recognized probably about halfway through that year of ministry that vocational ministry was not my calling in life. I really felt very clear that I had been gifted with certain skill sets and I wasn't using them to my maximum. And so I knew I wanted to get back to the continent at that point. And I didn't want to go back empty-handed. Having good intentions was not enough.
I'm actually curious, and I know we've got way more to unpack, but I'm curious to hear more about, when you go do a year of what's supposed to be a, passion-filled, mission-oriented job, or potentially the beginning of a career, and you're realizing that. Tell us about that. Like, how'd you connect with, this isn't the right fit for me?
Oh, you are opening up a can, my friend. That is a deep can. Man, so
it was all the dirt.
So I often tell the story to like students and young people that, I in high school, I was going to follow my father's footsteps. My dad was a math professor. I think he wanted us all to be engineers, as there's a kind of this very African parent thing about being an immigrant, trying to find very, stable, steady, careers. And so I was going to go into engineering, but I took a class. And I think it's kind of the beginning where I had the freedom, but also took the liberty to like say, I'm going to do what I find, most compelling, right? And so in high school, I took an economics class with Miss Fournier, and it was just dope. I love macroeconomics. I love that supply demand curve. It blew my mind. And I said, I want to study business. And so that's why I applied to UNC. Never seen it before, never been there. Actually, I'd been there once with my sister when she was applying 2 years earlier, but I didn't really care so much. It was a great program. They offered me some money. So I took it. And so got to UNC, was going to study business. And I think I was kind of on that track, and the business program at UNC is really hard to get into. It was hard to get into out of state. And so it was like a big deal. And gosh, there's so much story here. But anyway, so probably like 2 years in, you have to do this like 2 years of pre-work to get into the B school. I end up like my second year, last semester, I'll tell this story because I think it's also important to tell stories of like failure and where things don't work out, because my life did not work out at all in a straight path. So anyway, I ended up failing business statistics. I got a D. I know it's not quite failing, but I needed a C in order to like meet my prerequisites. I took it once, failed it, took it twice, failed it again. So it's now summer of my sophomore year, right? So I'm supposed to take it in the summer, right, as my last chance to like meet my prerequisites again to the B school program, the official B school program. And I just can't do it. I can't put myself through it again. And so I ended up like becoming an RA that summer. Also, because I can't go home. I don't know why. I just couldn't go home to my dad and look him in the face. So anyway, I remember I called him. I called him. I said, look, it's like, I can't. I said, I'm not going to get in. They rescinded my provisional acceptance into the business school. And he said, well, I'm not going to keep paying for you to go there and do just regular economics. You better bring your bag back to Delaware, your butt back to Delaware. And something in me was just like, no, I can't do that. Like, why would I can't go back to Delaware, And that was actually a really interesting time, because that summer, again, I refused to take the class. I don't know what got in my mind, but probably about halfway through the summer, I've spent a lot of time thinking and reflecting, and that's sort of been, I think, a trait of mine since I was being young. And I decided to write a letter. And I wish I had a copy of that letter now, but I wrote a letter to I think it was Karen Peters. She was the admissions officer. And the letter basically said, look, it was kind of two arguments. One is, I'm good enough. And two, like, this is my calling. Like, what I feel called to do in the world, I need this to get me there. And basically I said, look, I want to go back to Nigeria, and I want to help my countrymen have access to the kind of things that will help change the way of life for people, help raise the standard of living for my people. And this education, not just for me, it's for them. And I sent that letter off. I don't know. I think it was an email. Must have been an email. And I don't know. I just waited. I don't know what I was thinking. Like, I was doing summer RAing. I hadn't packed my stuff. I don't know. I can't. I was just. And I got a letter back while I was still an RA. It was like, we have admitted you into the program. So from that moment, like, I was committed to this business thing. Like, I was committed to learning, and it was an important sort of process, and that's really ownership, right? Like, that sense of purpose. So I think it's even more than passion. It was a very clear sense of purpose, right? That I was here for a reason. And so anyway, fast forward senior year, and I'm taking this class with a professor I really like, Professor Dido, marketing professor, but he's teaching this class that he started a couple years back called The Dark Side of Globalization. UNC is a Nike school, and that time there was a lot of protests around like supply chain and sort of what's this called, like sweatshop kind of, by Nike and all the places. So big protests at UNC. Anyway, so he started this class, and the class basically is teaching you about kind of all the ways in which business can go wrong, right? But then also he starts to introduce all these ways business can work to help people. And I learned about like the organic cotton industry and fair trade, and I think I don't think I'd ever heard of a nonprofit honestly before that class, but like, this idea that you could do well and do good, right? That I could use my analytical thinking to like meet where I think ultimately God has given me a heart of mercy, right? To care for people. And so that was powerful. And that really changed the direction of my life, because I was going to go into banking probably straight away. But I decided to take a shot at this UNC thing. I mean, this crew thing. And so that got me there, willing to try that and pursue that. And so when I got to crew, what was weird about it was like almost like 4 months in, I was like, no, I can't do this. Like, this is not for me. Like, so it's like from such certainty and from such like pursuit to like this moment of like, no, this is not what I thought it was. And I was looking for a lot of things when I went to crew. I was looking for like a lot more like kind of mentorship and discipleship. But I also just had this belief. I mean, I was an idealist even back then, and it was not living up to my ideals. And then I realized that, again, I kind of came back to like, why was I here? I came back to this thing like that I felt very strongly about, me going back to content. And this story that I've always told myself privately, which you all probably be the first to hear this, but I've always thought of myself a bit of as a Daniel, right? That I didn't have a choice moving to America. Nobody asked me, as I often say. And so like Daniel, I felt like, okay, so why, and I always wrestle with identity, like, why am I here? Like, I'm not American enough. Kids always picking on me. Kids telling me to go back home to Africa. And then when I went to visit, like my sophomore year in college, they would be like, it was very clear that I didn't belong there either, right? They would try to scam me and scheme me, because I was talking with an accent. I was dressed like someone different. So I didn't feel like I was one of them either. And so, this idea of like going back home and being of value and offering something back home has just been in my heart for a long time. I've always felt Nigerian, even though I haven't been there for so long. And so, anyway, so that kernel kind of came back in that season, and it just kind of illuminated something in my mind. I was like, that's what I need to pursue. I need to get back there. And it did something very interesting. I don't know if I heard it from somewhere, but I did something interesting when I started to do like a backwards plan. And I started to say, okay, if I'm looking at all the leaders that people talk bad about in Nigeria, like, what do I need to be different than them? And so I started to think, and I was like, I need to have, this is one of the reasons, Finn might appreciate this. Like, I realized then that I need to be able to speak French. Like, they were surrounded by French-speaking countries. Why aren't we able to do business and strike great partnerships with our surrounding neighbors? Like, I need to learn to speak French. We need to improve our economy. So I was already in business, but I was like, what drives economy in America? It's like, it's small business. So I had the opportunity to join the best small business bank in America, BB&T. Like, I need to go back there. Like, I need to learn how they do it. And then I began to just think about all these things that I would need, right? And what was powerful though was when I think I was reading the book called The Master Plan of Evangelism or something of that nature. But I think this picture formed in my mind in that moment, this idea that some of the people who have done great works in their life did it at like, and mind you, I was young, but I was like, they did it when they were old. They were 30, 32, like at the time.
Yeah.
Like,
everything once you're there.
Jesus did his ministry at 33, you know what I'm saying? Like, MLK was like in his 30s, like, Gandhi was in his 30s. But even more than that, I started thinking about like, but people who really make a name for themselves are even older than that. They're like in their 50s and 60s, right? Like, people who are like who are producing their masterworks, right? Their masterpieces are in their 50s and 60s. So I remember just this weight lifting off of me. It's like, I don't have to spend the next 5 years trying to become my best self. I have to spend the next 10, 15, 20 years gathering all the pieces to be there when I'm 48 or 52, or how I need some more years. So I'm gonna add 55. So, so that was a really important thought process for me, and that really shaped the trajectory of really the next 5-6 years of my life. I mean, I had a very clear picture.
Because what it sounds like you were figuring out was like a pretty complicated thing, right? That's first of all, that move requires changing businesses a lot, right? So to pick those things up. So you're realizing something that you're kind of isn't going to fit into the role you're currently in, and you need to go accumulate a number of experiences in a number of places.
Yeah.
I want to make a couple observations and questions.
Sure.
First of all, the fact that you remember so many of your teachers' names is super impressive. I don't think I remember any of my professors' names in college. So well done there. Makes me realize that I didn't learn anything in college. The other thing you said that really stuck out to me, and I think this is, and again, it just kind of goes to show that, having a white evangelical outlook on so many things just taints the way you look at stuff, is how you said you were a missionary in Orlando. And because just so often in white evangelical America, we're like, oh, we're going to be a missionary to Africa. Right, and like, that's the way it is. You go from America to Africa or whatever country and continent, and you do mission work. And we just kind of forget that, oh, it actually can go in the opposite direction. And oftentimes it should. So I love that. So that the question I have is, when you felt like, oh, ministry isn't for me, Did you ever feel like it was? Was there ever a sense that, hey, I should be doing ministry? Or was it just kind of a, hey, this is a good opportunity that's in front of me right now, so I'll just take it?
That's a great question. No, actually, the funny thing is, they brought me on there to do fundraising. So I was never like preacher. I always had skills. And so that was always my sense of it. And if I'm honest, I never did any evangelism while I was there. Like, I was always very scared of that part of it. And then I read a book actually at Crew that was really powerful, which is about being a contagious Christian. And basically that's the idea that, there's not only one way to do evangelism, right? You can do it relationally, right? And that was my strength. I remember there's one of those funny moments. I remember in college, having this moment of like prayer or contemplation or whatever it was, but I basically promised myself that I would always choose relationships over my grades. And so, and
it's so admirable.
I just, but it was like, I think I was learning about myself then that this is the thing that I care most about. This is what is, what I love about the space. And so I would say, like, if someone comes to me, and people always come to me asking for advice, and I prayed for wisdom a lot as a kid, let's just say that. And I would just say, look, I'd rather spend a whole night with a friend and have to figure out my work later than say, oh, I got to study now. Like, that wasn't the way I wanted to live in college. And so I mean, I think, relationship has always been sort of my style. So I never thought I would be a minister in the sense. And it's interesting. I joined a Christian fraternity at UNC, and we had this like ceremony we do when you cross. And the ceremony is basically people praying for you, and then there's like a prophetic word that goes out. And one of the prophetic words that came out was basically like that, this person saw me as a minister, but not like a typical minister, like doing, kind of, leading a flock in a different kind of way, or serving or equipping the flock in a different kind of way than sort of typical, sermon on a Sunday kind of thing. So it's kind of been maybe in the back of my mind that I was never going to be that, and which is probably why it was easier for me to make that choice so quickly, just after a year.
I decided in college to choose friends over grades too, but it was just because I like going to parties and playing board games.
No, I enjoyed that too.
Segun, was your dad on board for that?
Hells no. Hell no. Which is interesting, right? Because it's really because of my dad that I had the freedom to make these choices, right? My dad had very early on basically said, you can go wherever you want for college. Like, we never talked about money, which probably should have, which is a problem in many African homes, but we never talked about the money or the cost of education. It was just like, go wherever you want. And he was always, even like with marriage, he was like, marry whoever you want. Like, it was just, there was a lot of freedom that they gave us. And so I kind of always, and a lot of independence that they built into us. And so I always felt like it was my responsibility to kind of live out the best life, right, I could, because of what my parents sacrificed.
Actually, I was listening to a podcast. Hey, podcasts.
Whoa. Hey.
I was listening to a podcast where I think it was Armchair Expert, where they were interviewing Angela Duckworth, who wrote Grit. And she was talking about how, they were debating a lot, like, what counts as first generation? Is that the generation that moves to, America or immigrates, or is that the kids born of that family? But point is, she was getting into how she asked her dad one day, because he had a lot of high standards for her education. When she decided not to be a medical doctor, he said, will you at least be a senator? So, as an example, is what she says in the podcast. But she said that she asked him one day, would you rather be successful or would you rather be happy? And he spent a few days thinking about it and came back and said, I'd rather be successful. And she sort of unpacks that, like, when you have the grit, when you make the decision, like when you make the decision to move to another country in general, but especially one where you're going to be very different looking than most of the people, you're making a choice for something other than present happiness, right? Rather than daily happiness, rather than daily comfort, and that there is a different mindset.
Yeah. But that's not even like that's not even a what's that word? The sort of false equivalence or whatever. That's a weak fight, right?
False dichotomy.
The dichotomy is weak, because one of the things that I had to think about, and I had to come to grips with this idea of what is happiness, right? And there's a lot of people like, oh yeah, do it for your happiness, do it for your happiness. But I mean, what I realized was that happiness is momentary, right? It's fleeting, right? And so the thing I started talking about was, and think a lot about, is like, how do I pursue joy, right? Like some of the things I've enjoyed the most, had the most satisfaction from, were not the jobs or the activities where I was just happy all the time, right? They actually had difficulty in them. So happiness, I realized that's not what I'm chasing after, right? That doesn't like truly satisfy. And so, like I think, that it's also I think it's a false carrot, this idea of like, oh yeah, do what makes you happy. And it's interesting that, I was sharing with a class, I was teaching a class and sharing about passion and purpose, and these ladies from the griot were talking about, what does it mean to pursue passion? And basically they said, again, that's one of those sort of things that has been overdone. Like, don't pursue passion. Passions are actually dangerous. Passions can be reckless and harmful. Like, why are you pursuing passions? Like, pursue purpose, right?
Yeah, I think for sure these words are we simplify them. And I've thought about that success versus happiness question since hearing that interview. And I'm like, I don't think these things aren't opposites, or they aren't two individual components, in my life.
So we maybe have been leading Jake astray as we help him pursue his passion project. We've been
super reckless,
getting him all riled up to pursue the.
Thanks a lot, Shags. You're the only one who's been honest and most helpful friend that I have, apparently. Moving along in this journey. So what were the next kind of major milestones?
Yeah. So, I mean, amazing story. I decided I was going to leave Impact. Just so happened that was the same month that my offer to join the bank, which I turned down, expired. And so I called them and said, hey, look, I know my offer no longer is valid, but I think I want to come back and join this executive training program at BB&T. And I think I called them on a Friday. And on Saturday morning, they had airmailed the offer to my house. And I remember, I prayed a lot about this idea of pursuing the things of God really will not put you in a worse place. And that was, for me, it was like testament. So I was like, bet, that's it. Like, the Lord is behind this. Like, it's okay. And I was like, I'm gonna commit to this for the full year, but I already have my next move. And so I moved to Winston-Salem, did 6 months at BB&T University. I actually learned a lot about leadership development there, a lot of stuff that I ended up using later on in my education career. Spent 2 years there working as a banker, and realized then that was it was just giving money to people who already had money. I was actually particularly excited to move to Prince George's County, which is a predominantly Black county. I was trying to help young entrepreneurs get access to capital. It just wasn't happening. This was right before the recession, so everything was tightening up, and BB&T is notoriously a very conservative lender. So anyway, left that, ended up joining, one of the potential clients that I called on was a Black alumni at UNC. He was running a nonprofit. He said, well, you want to come work for me? I said, sure, why not? And I spent a year working for this nonprofit, basically like a mentorship program. It's like a mini ALA, really. Summer program, bring kids for 2 summers. They get great school stuff from Georgetown, great internships and experiences. Anyway, that was that was basically my last stop on the for-profit train. Ever since then, I've been working for nonprofits. And so, I did that. Unfortunately, lost that job in about 9 months, moved home with my parents, found another gig. And now it's committed. I was like, you know what? The next thing, it's got to get me to the continent, because I can't. I'm tired. I've been waiting. I've been looking for visas, and I can't do it. Next job. Found this. Actually, this job found me. Another crazy story. I don't have a job, but I have a girlfriend who I'm in love with and I want to marry. So, and actually my big brother says, why are you in Delaware, man? You don't belong here. This place ain't for you. And I just listen, none of my dreams, none of my aspirations take me through Delaware. So I don't have a job. It's but I got to get back to DC. DC is where I need to be. I don't know what I need to be doing, but I know where I need to be. And sometimes it happens that way in the journey, I think. So I need to be in DC. So anyway, I go back to DC, staying with my cousin, don't have a job. And I just walk. I'm walking to Gallery Place, and I just see a sign that says interviews happening today. And it's Potbelly, it's a little sandwich shop. And they're doing interviews for like all over the city. They're just going like gangbusters. It's like a fair, it's like an employee fair day. So I go in there, interview, because I was like thinking like, okay, look, I don't have a job yet. Let me become a waiter or something. I can do, you know, be a great skill to have future in life. I'll be a waiter, make some dough. And I get this interview. They hire me and it's like, look, we'll hire you right today. Like you can start work next week. And they hire me, and they actually have a few locations around the city, but they actually hired me to work in the location next to the bank I used to work at before I went to the nonprofit. And so it turns out that I'm working next door to my former office. And of course, you know, within like a week's time, I'm taking out the trash because I haven't even made it to like behind the counter yet. Like I'm still cleaning bathrooms and taking trash out. And I run into one of my former colleagues, and she's driving her Audi, and she's like, "Hey, is that you, Segun?" I was like, "Oh yeah," like, "Yeah, girl, that's me, yeah, that's me, girl." And it's like, "Hey," it's like, and then, I kid you not, after that, there's like a stream of BB&T people coming through, and I'm guarantee you they're just trying to make sure, like, is this him for real? Like, what? He's cutting sandwiches now, and so, sure enough, like the next week, you know, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays, I'm serving people, and you know, these are people that I would have been leading, right? You know, we were, you know, somewhere we were in the executive program together. You know, we were, yeah, you know, whatever. I was, yeah. Anyway, long story short, is that one of those people tells another colleague about me working at Potbelly, right? It so happens that that colleague, who has now left the organization, has been looking for me for the last 6 or 7 weeks because she wants me to come work for her. And so it turns out that there was a job waiting for me this whole time, but I needed to humble myself. This is the story I realized. I need to humble myself really to the point of humiliation to do that work. And so she literally calls the shop one morning, says, "Can I speak to Segun?" And the manager's like, "Hey, you have a call?" I was like, "No, I don't have it. Nobody knows. Nobody knows I work here. Nobody's calling me at Potbelly's on L Street."
It's a different Segun. Different Segun.
Like, you know, it's not happening. And it's like, no, they're asking for you. So I pick up the phone, and it's my friend Jackie, and she's like, "Hey, I've got a job for you. Do you want to go work with me?" It's like, sure. And that's how I got my next gig. So I ended up doing financial literacy work in the city for public schools. You know, Black and brown kids. It's like the you know, the urban version of JA, basically. So again, contextualized ministry in many ways. So yeah, that was my next gig, and I was really excited because they actually had a South Africa office, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is it! If I do my job well, I can like put a request in to transfer to South Africa, and then I'll finally live my dream." I was like, like, Lord, he's just stacking it all up. Alas, that didn't work. So.
Wait, before I'm curious. I have one big question I want to go back to, but that's maybe a whole sidetrack that we should come to. But first, I'm just curious about you kind of skimmed over how you felt about being seen by your former coworkers. I feel, I mean, the reason I want to ask about this before you like talk about that is I feel like one of the ways that people get in their own way in their career journeys is needing every single step to be forward, and not because all the challenging feelings that come with maybe taking a step back to be able to, you know, maybe it's just assess the situation. Like, where do I actually want to go so that my next step forward is in a direction that's more in line or whatever. But it feels like we get stuck on a path and we're not willing to back up a little bit to find the new path. So I'm curious about the feel like that is pretty much like the nightmare scenario for people in that same tension of like, I can't run into who knew me from my previous life if I take a step back. Yeah. So I just want to hear a little bit about how did that really feel? Or were you cool with it? Were you just owning it?
Oh no, it was hard. It was painful. I mean, I had my pride, but I think really when I think about like my faith journey at that point, like the Lord was teaching me a lot about humility. And I think the phrase that came out of, for me, was like, out of humiliation comes humility, right? Like, you know, so no, it was humiliating because what I wanted to say was that I was a better performer. I had more potential than all these other people, right? I outperformed many of them in the executive program. And so, I mean, I knew what I was capable of. And so it was hard. It was really hard. But I also knew I was where I needed to be, you know? And that was more comforting than almost anything else. Like I knew I was supposed to be in DC. I knew it because I knew like if I wanted to be in the international, if I want to get back to the continent, if I want to go do the work I want to do at home in Nigeria, I need to be around this international network of people. I just have to be here and something can happen. And so I had a lot of belief in that time, but it was not easy. I was, the sandwiches were good because I had a meal every day, but that was about it, you know, and also I was able to like see my girlfriend at the time. And so those were like the big benefits of like, you know.
Ironically, the only time I've been to Potbelly was in DC, actually.
My birthday.
Yeah, for his birthday.
Was it for Finn's birthday? The first time I went to Potbelly was in DC, the one right by the White House, because my brother worked at Living Social right by there.
Oh, yeah.
And the second time I went to Potbelly was in Baltimore, right by that one that's right by the water near Camden Yard.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I think I've been there on that one too.
Let's actually talk about Potbelly for a little while. That's a pretty interesting.
But
brought to you by.
So moving on to kind of the next phase, this job that you took in DC.
Operation was hard. It was significant in the sense that it was hard. It was actually, and this is what it's important also, often I find that there are many experiences that you realize what you do not want to do or the kind of leader you do not want to be. Like that experience was formative in shaping the kind of education that I did not want to be a part of. Large scale, like mass sort of running through numbers. I knew it became very clear to me, like I did not want to be involved in that kind of work. I need to be intimate. I need to sit with the same group of kids for a prolonged period of time so that I can see whether what I'm doing actually is taking root. So my commitment to sort of outcomes-based impact work grew out of that season. It also was very clear to me that what good leadership looked like out of that. I had a great manager, great mentor, and there was just a lot of, for me, values issues that I came across in that experience. And it really solidified in me like the kind of leader I wanted to be and the kind of leader I did not want to be.
What kind of examples did you take away from that? Like what are some of the things that you remember being like, that's the kind of leader I want to be, or that is an effective quality?
I knew I wanted to be the kind of manager who cared about their direct reports more than just how they perform. My manager, Jackie, she's like my big sister. She helped me figure out whether I wanted to propose to my wife or not, right? I called her Valentine. She helped me get my Valentine's Day gifts right, but she cared about me, and she was tough on me. She knew that I had potential. She knew I wasn't organized, and she said, "You're going to have to get organized." And she forced me to get myself organized because I was managing a lot of volunteers, and she's like, "It's just a matter of putting the puzzle pieces in place and making it run." And so she cared about my development. And that for me was a crucial factor.
I'm wondering, right? So this is before you finally make your move to the continent. I'm foreshadowing for anyone who's listening. What did you know about yourself and your passions, or at that point you're jumping off, you're about to go to back to the continent, albeit a different part of the continent. What did you know about yourself then? That you're like, yes, this is me, this is true, this is what I'm going to do with my life? Was it just that like you wanted to be on the continent? Was it just like entrepreneurship? What was it?
I did a lot of reflection. I thought about what I was good at, what I cared about, and I wrote a letter to all of my friends, all my network actually, not just my friends, my whole network. And I sent an email saying, "Hey, this is what I'm looking for. I wish I could find it for you all now." I basically said, I know I want to work with young people. I know I want to work on the continent. I know I want to work in a place where my manager, right, cares about me as a person. I wrote a number of things like that. I don't think I even wrote anything about my strengths. I just wrote about what I wanted. And then I emailed that to all the people I knew. And it was one of my friends who sent me an email about African Leadership Academy was looking for teaching fellows. Again, I knew where I needed to be. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I mean, that was actually a big question. I've always struggled with that. Even now I struggle with, like, I don't know what to do. Like, what is my thing? I mean, at that point, what was my thing? You know, I'd been in banking for 2 years. Am I a banker? Not really. I'd been in financial literacy. You know, I've just been in so many things. I was moving 2 years, moving from thing to thing. So I didn't really know that I had a thing, but I knew where I needed to be, and it was overseas. I needed to be on the continent. And it's funny enough, I actually knew that I wanted to be in South Africa. The reason why I was excited about Operation Hope having in South Africa also is that I knew, I had thought about it. I had done the backward planning again. I'd said, look, if I'm going to get to Nigeria, I can't handle that place right away. Like, I'm too soft. I need a cushioned landing. South Africa, and in my senior in college, I went to South Africa for a trip with a friend, and I just toured the whole country, and I fell in love. I was like, yeah, I can do South Africa. Let me go there first. And so that was like my landing place, and I knew that's where I need to land first. And so, yeah, so, you know, it's funny, like, Ryan, like, I applied to be a teaching fellow. There was no leadership opportunity available then. I didn't know I was going to do leadership or do any of that stuff. I just wanted to be a teaching fellow. And again, to listen to Jake, your point about, like, what was important about some of these different moments, like that Potbelly moment prepared me for this teaching fellow moment. Like, my willingness to humble myself to be where I needed to be made me think, okay, at this point now I've done 3 years, you know, like, I'm 5 years into my professional career. I'm a, you know, program manager, but being a teaching fellow, basically starting a new career trajectory at the bottom, like, I was willing to do that because ALA was going to sponsor my visa to be in South Africa. Like, that was like the most important thing, and I jumped at that.
Yeah, but also just for everyone to understand, to be a teaching fellow, it's like, it is to take the job that the 21-year-olds are fighting for. So I mean, like, you were probably interviewing against people who were 21, yeah, finishing at Yale, finishing at Harvard, who are trying to. This was a competitive opportunity for them to go to South Africa and teach, basically teach for America, but teach, yeah, at ALA. And you were as a 28,
yeah,
something,
probably
28-year-old not competing, but also, like, willingly taking this thing that probably looked like a pretty solid backward step.
Yeah, it was.
Let me just stop before we go any further. Maybe we could talk for a second or explain what ALA stands for. I also want to clarify that Finn and Chegs both work there. So that was one of the connections I know.
So ALA, African Leadership Academy, was a pretty unique institution. I think for me, the thing that caught my attention right away were the values of the institution and the vision. The vision of the institution is to bring peace and prosperity to Africa. And I always add, since I've left, I've started adding in our lifetime. But the mission of the organization was to develop the next generation of leaders for the continent of Africa that would bring about that peace and prosperity.
So it's just to add on, it's a high school. It's a 2-year high school. It takes the best and the brightest 16 to 18-year-olds from all African nations, and brings them down for this basically 2-year heavy, intensive academic program. But the thing that makes it special is that they have this curriculum in leadership, entrepreneurship, and African studies. And so basically the school is a magnet worldwide for people who want to teach something outside of the norm, i.e. in this case, African studies, and what Chegs helped lead the initiation of, which is creation of entrepreneurial leadership. So bringing together the leadership and the entrepreneurship. It's this place that's really like, you know, kind of a city on the hill in the sense that literally people from around the world flock to this place to see what has been created. It's a one of a kind high school ish experience. And but it wasn't that when Chegg started. It was the 2-year-old fledgling, probably not going to make it nonprofit. And I'm sure just even going down there was a risk, but as you said, they would sponsor your visa. So at least that was going to happen.
What was the difference in timelines between you two getting there?
But I first met Segun in a bar in Aspen, Colorado, at the Aspen Ideas Festival, because Segun was a Bezos, faculty scholar.
Interesting to be headed to work with someone in Johannesburg and you meet them 5 hours drive from your childhood home.
The crazy thing about that for me was that Sheg was like, yeah, man, just come up here. Like, we're at this thing. There's just like a lot of people around. And I was like, can I just crash the Aspen Ideas Festival? And like this thing sponsored by the Bezos family. And so, but what ended up happening was I went up there and they're so welcoming. Like the Mike and Jackie Bezos are just two of the best people. But Sheg, like, he introduced me as this new person for ALA, and they're like, oh my gosh, like, come in, you can, hang out. And then like, do you want to come over to our house tonight for the 4th of July, like, barbecue? And I was like, you don't need to ask that question. You can just say you're invited, and obviously I will go. So I was like hoping to have a random conversation with this guy, because I thought there was a small chance that ALA was a scam. And I was just like, I got to meet this guy who's supposedly going to be my manager. And the next thing I knew, I'm like I think we're watching fireworks at the freaking Bezos mansion in Aspen, Colorado. I'm like walking through their basement, which is Narnia. I'm actually serious. It is Narnia is what their basement was. The Bezos mansion was Narnia. And I'm just like, what is my life right now? I cannot, how did all these things come together?
Wait, is that like the actual theme of their basement?
Yes. Like, you walk into a wardrobe downstairs and the entire thing is Narnia. You kind of took a chance on ALA and then like pretty quickly became a high flyer in the institution, obviously. You end up being my manager there for a few years. What do you attribute that, like, kind of quick jump in the organization, kind of fellow to leading a department within 9 months, less than, to what do you attribute that? Like, how did you jump so fast, and how did you just like climb in that organization like you did?
I think it really went to my sense of purpose. Like, I joined ALA because all the things I've told you about what I wanted to do on the continent, ALA was the proxy for me, right? I don't have to be in Nigeria, but they're gonna be Nigerian kids here who can go back, and I can give them the things that I've learned, right, to help make our country better. And so actually, the funny thing is, it's a bit confusing. At some point, they kind of offered me to be the head of leadership. And then I got there and there was already a head of leadership. And so I was like, okay, I'm not sure what's going on here, but whatever, it was like, cool. And then everybody left because it was things were kind of bad. And, but it was probably about 2 months before the end of the school year. And I wrote a mini manifesto. And I just said, this is my vision for what leadership at African Leadership Academy can look like. And I think that's what made the difference. I had a very clear sense of what this place could do and what it needed to do for kids to live out that vision. Because that vision that ALA wrote was not ALA's vision. That was my vision for Africa. So I owned that, and I've to this day I still own that, right? So I always held ALA to that, like I was a constituent of the continent myself. And not just because, and so so all those things, the values, those are things that I had written it for myself in my journals, right? Those values meant so much to me. And so it just felt like this perfect fit. But I always say to friends that, and some folks that I meet, is like, I never went to ALA because I heard, the founders speak eloquently or make their pitch or make their case. I read values, I read vision and mission. And I was like, this is where my calling needs to take me right now. And so I wrote that 7-page vision document. And that's when I got a call from Chris and Fred to meet with Jenny.
Wait, did you give it to them? And they were like, we got to talk to this. We got to talk to him about a leadership position because he's on to something.
Well, it's funny. It's a bit about that and opportunity, right? Literally everyone else had left. So I don't know but they could have done what they often did, which is like go find some high flying person somewhere else, right? And bring them, parachute them in. But they gave me a chance based on what I put down.
But there's a chance if your manifesto had been like, what ALA needs is more snacks, you still would have gotten.
Exactly. There's still a chance. A very good chance actually at that point. They were literally
You know, we do
zero
need more
bodies left.
stacks. That's probably why everyone left.
Get that man.
I don't think there was anybody left in the entrepreneurship and leadership departments. I think everybody was gone. It was literally just me.
So they're looking at you, just being like, they're like looking at you thinking, this guy's a sucker. Let's hire him. Let's promote him.
Oh man, that was
Except, okay, but here's the thing. Let me just say, so I show up and, 9 months or whatever, 11 months into your time there, and there I had no sense that you were just like handed a job as some like patsy or something. No, I'm serious. There was nothing about you or the way that you carried the role that made me think this guy doesn't own this role, or that this guy doesn't deserve this role, or that he wasn't sought out for this role. And I don't know if that was you just projecting or faking till you making it or whatever you did, but for me it was like there was no question about like your role and the way that you pushed a vision from a very small pocket into to be across the whole organization, which was far bigger than a high school, if anybody can imagine. It's like, imagine like a small university basically is how it functions.
It's funny you say that, because in many ways, if you think about the story I've shared with you, this was the culmination of, I graduated in 2004. So about 6 years of thinking and dreaming, right? Like this was like my dream job, right? This was, I'd done leadership curriculum at Impact. I'd worked with young people at the Institute. I'd done financial literacy. I helped, entrepreneurs. This was like me. And now I get to do like the thing that I really believe in is like help Africa be better, right? Like what? I mean, young people, like it fit me so well. And so I spoke with an authority that came from deep within myself. I didn't require any external parties. And I just had a clear vision of what this place needed to do to live up to, its own desires, right? And I loved it because those are the words that if I could have dared to put words out there, those are the words that I would have put out there. And so, it reminds me of like, there's this random verse in the Bible. It basically says something like Jesus spoke with authority. And I can't remember what exactly it was, but there was this idea of like speaking with authority. Like there was nothing else. He just spoke to the people, like the leaders of the temple with such authority. And I was like, what does that mean? All right, like what does that actually mean? And it's just like this sense of knowing, like I know something you don't, and I'm just gonna say it with very kind of plainly, and I believe it, and that authority has power. And so I think that's probably, as I think about it, Ryan, it's probably what I felt or I sensed that in myself.
By the way, I'm looking up the verse here, and it's Matthew 7:29, and the NIV version is, because he taught as one who had authority and not as their teachers of the law.
I remember my first day, I was super nervous. I was really, really nervous because actually I never really led a team up until that point. So it felt like it was a stretch for me too. But I remember coming in, and I think one of the things I knew then was just like, again, that humility from those other experiences were really was in my mind. I was just like, look, guys, I'm nervous. I don't really know what I'm doing here. So, but I think I said to you all, like, but here are the things that I value. I think I led with like the values that I had, right, and what I wanted to commit to them to do, and what I hoped that they would commit to do. And I think, and that really was the foundation of our work.
What does it really mean to be the head of leadership at a school like this? Like, what was the daily routine? Like, what were some of the actual practices and things you were doing to instill leadership?
Well, I think what I've come to really understand is like, it's really about organizational behavior, right? So for me, it was a cultural, right? We talked a lot about, not only did we have to develop curriculum to teach students how to embody good leadership, which we have to define as well. You do that, and so whatever, like, so part of it is you're facilitating a team of educators, and so you have meetings about class and like what program you're going to do, and blah, 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 which kid needs to get a grade and doesn't need to get a grade, or which kids needs to get a report. So you're doing that stuff. But then what was exciting for me about the show was that there's this whole organizational element where it's like, hey, we're supposed to be a leadership academy, but we're not living up to that name, right? We have to live up to it culturally. And so then it became like, how do we get leadership to be part of how we do sports, how we do our residence life, how we do our admissions, how we do our hiring. And that was like for me, the really powerful stuff, right? Trying to really deeply inculcate like the leadership ethos that we had developed and created into every part of that institution, so that it would live and live long after us. And that was fun. And then there was just opportunities that were just mushrooming because of that good work, you know. And I had lots of ideas of what we would do after. I thought we would create our own press. I wanted to do ALA press. We would write books on the continent about issues that, you know, aren't written and talked about enough, that, you know, we would sponsor, you know, data, you know, research in ways, you know, there were just so many things that is still in my mind about what ALA can do and could do. So it was just what was beautiful. Like there was just a wealth of ideas that were pouring forth from within me. And that made it so much fun. And then the people were great to work with.
Just add a quick couple things to what Sheg was saying, because he's humble. He was the role was to basically be the thought leader of the organization around the namesake of the organization. And so while we had a very famous founder, this guy named Fred, who's like been times 100 like most influential people in the world, the actual definition of what we taught kids and what became this magnet for the world was really shaped by Shegs. And the fact that it's now spread across the organization, and if you talk to anybody in Africa about like who's doing really good work, you will not get 3 names deep without hearing of African Leadership Academy or African Leadership University. I promise you. And really that came from the work that Shegs led, and I watched him lead for a number of years. And now, because of the work he and I were able to do, and others, to consult to other schools around the world, you now hear Shegs' name thrown around in good ways, in like, in a place like in rural Kenya, where they've started a school that's modeled after ALA, in a random school in Slovakia, in another place in Colombia. These sort of copycat schools have started up, and the stuff that Shegs did was basically copy pasted into those other environments. And so to be the head of leadership, of entrepreneurial leadership at ALA, was not just like being a department head who organized meetings, although that was part of it. There was so much more in the shaping of the ethos of the organization that, again, is now global and is so highly regarded.
Actually, thank you, Ryan, for that, because it actually is relevant for me now, because I'm trying to find what my next, you know, passion. It's really not about passion. It's really what my next purpose work is, really. Like, and trying to hone in on what do I really do best. And I think, again, kind of going back to this idea of culture, system-wide, like organizational change, and you know, that's what I really love. And I think it's hard work, but I love getting into that stuff.
Taking a note here, you said purpose what? What was it? You said your next purpose work.
Yeah, purpose work, I think.
Can you, because you've made that distinction a couple of times.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on it for us?
Yeah.
We've been making a podcast about passion projects, and I think we maybe need to switch to purpose projects. So
yeah.
Can you explain like in your mind how because it sounded earlier like you were saying you kind of evolved the idea of it being a work about passion to a work about purpose.
I think about it. Imagine you have a platoon, right? And they've been called to a mission, let's say a peacekeeping mission, right? So their mission, right, is very specific. Their mission is to protect the hospital, in what I do, right? That's their mission. Okay. Now, but their purpose is to bring, is to allow democracy to flourish, right, in that country, right? So there's a higher purpose to the mission that they live out every day, right? Mission is what you do day to day. I would often talk about purpose, and I would even talk about vision, right? So you might have a vision, right? So their vision is to see that hospital be free to do what it does, right? To be free to allow people of all shapes and sizes get the resources and the help they need to have a flourishing population that can then go about and create economic growth and blah, 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 blah. And that's this vision that's driving the work of this platoon. So you've got this platoon whose purpose is to ultimately bring about democracy, right? Or to let democracy flourish. They've got a vision for what this hospital will do for this community. They've got a mission right now, right? And then they have strategies, right? Well, how do we make this hospital safe? We need to have a strategy for that. And so we think it's about, soft power or we need to show our show of force. We need to bring all the military guns and Air Force things we have, right? So you have different strategies. And then I always talk about tactics, right? Tactics are ultimately the way in which you deploy, right, those strategies. And so that doesn't really get to passion, but I would say that for me, that's how I've always thought about purpose. It's like it's this big overarching, like, long-term aim that you hope to accomplish. Passion, I mean, it's funny because passion doesn't really fit into that, really. Passions are the things that you just like to do. I used to tell my kids, passions are the things that you wake up early to do or you stay up late to do. And that when you hit a bump in the road, you still do it anyway. Like you still want to keep doing it, even if it's hard.
So you're saying purpose work is sort of like an idea that's so big that and so important that discomfort is kind of maybe not irrelevant, but isn't a distraction from what you're trying to do with purpose. And a passion project is a little bit more of the things that you feel good about in the moment, but don't necessarily add up to a larger something larger than you.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think passion is probably, as you talk about it, I think about it, it's probably more personal exploration, and purpose has more to do with other people, right? Like how you make the world and others, a better place. And so passion is about exploring the things you're good at, maybe developing them, strengthening them. Passion. Those things are good. But I ultimately think your passions have to serve your purpose.
In a previous interview, Tori, that we interviewed, she said she read this from Yuval Harari, that you've got a narrative self and an experience self. And the narrative self is about what, essentially what's the arc of your life that you're trying to be about. And experience self is sort of like, what's the arc of your day? And that, she's considering becoming a foster parent. And she was talking about how her experience self right now, the entire day, every day is her oyster. She can do with it what she wishes. And that becoming a foster parent is coming at the expense of her experience self in favor of her narrative self, and that she cares about something bigger. Is that kind of a bit analogous to what you're saying, the passion versus purpose?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, for me, purpose may allow me to make some choices that were, like you said, that were steps backwards. I didn't have a passion for cutting sandwiches, but it got me closer towards my purpose. I knew where I needed to be to get towards that purpose idea, that broader narrative of life that I felt compelled by. And so I learned passions along the way. I got to explore passions. Some passions, leave you. I used to be real passionate about, like, American football, right? American basketball. I could stay up all night and watch that stuff. But I grew towards my purpose in such ways that the ones that best suited that purpose kind of came to the fore.
Yeah.
I would say you explore your passions, For sure. It's good to explore them things, know what drives you, what motivates you, what kind of gets you into that flow space.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not going to be enough.
I think it's pretty clear that Potbelly wasn't like a big passion of yours. It's not even on your LinkedIn profile. So again, I don't want to skip over too much, but what is some of the stuff that you were doing? Like, how has that affected what you're doing now? And maybe start with, what are you doing now?
Yeah.
Owner and lead consultants, leadership consultants.
Yeah.
There's something I've heard those types of terms a lot, and I'm like, what do people in those positions do? And I would love to learn more, because I think there's so much substance there and so much usefulness and just so many life-changing experiences, I'm sure.
Oh, hotspot. That was a hotspot question right there. What do you even do?
What would you say you do there?
Yeah, like my LinkedIn says sort of my day job, and then like my entrepreneurial adventures, as I might call them. But yeah, my day job currently is working at an independent school. And unfortunately, that's changed. Like, I went there with a sense of purpose to help reshape how they think about community service, and to give them a culture shift. COVID-19 has curtailed that. So I'm teaching social studies to 7th graders currently. It's not my passion, and I'm struggling with that. If I'm honest with you, after leaving ALA, I have not felt professionally connected with a sense of purpose since ALA. And I'm actually
why did you? I mean, maybe I skipped over this part. Why did you leave?
Remember oh my gosh. So remember those leadership thesis things we used to do, Ryan? Oh my gosh. I think I had one year.
It was an assignment every student had to do before they left the academy. It was, okay, you've been studying leadership for 2 years. What can you say about yourself? What have you learned about who you are as a leader, as a person? Who do you want to be in your life? Everyone had to do it before they left the institution.
It was cool. It was like a thesis, and you had to defend it. You had to defend it in front of people, like you defend your PhD thesis or your whatever. And anyways, but when my team and my crew of friends began to leave, I think, Ryan, you started this when you left, or maybe it was Beta, I can't remember, but we said, let's do our closing process by like writing a reflection on what we've learned, what we've gained. And anyway, so I say all that to say that I think I wrote mine, and I can't remember what it was that really drove me to leave, but I mean, the simple answers were that I started a family and it was time to move back to the States. And I think that's really what I struggle with of late in my life, is that my purpose has become more about my family, right? My kids. And I've struggled with that because I've derived so much of my personal identity from my vocational purpose. And so I've actually, in this last 3 or 4 years, I've had to actually accept that the work I'm doing doesn't feel deeply connected to my sense of purpose in the world. I mean, obviously, I'm not doing things that I'm like, I don't believe in. But it doesn't hit all those spots like ALA did all those years ago. But
maybe you want to start a podcast.
I was going to say, I think we've got the next focus of the podcast.
me and you are in the same situation.
We just found Jake's podcast this week, so perfect.
You know, it's funny because for many years, and this is one of those passions that I need to explore, is writing. And I think I've been avoiding it for many number of years, and I feel like maybe there's a time is coming that I need to write a lot of the things that I've learned, all these stories, all these ideas. So many thinking processes have gone into where I am now. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe there's another way. And so, you know, my work. So, but a funny short story is that so I came back from ALA. I moved from South Africa. I was still working with African Leadership Academy for a couple of years after I moved to the States. But then I realized, like, look, I've been doing this for other people. I want to have my own experience. I've been teaching my students to be entrepreneurs, and I've not done it myself. Like, I've been an entrepreneur most of my life. I want to experience what it means to be an entrepreneur. So I decided I want to go out on my own. So for about 1.5 years, I I became a solopreneur, which is another thing I realized is different than other things, right? Being a solopreneur is not the same thing as being an entrepreneur in my view. So yeah, I started a consultancy. I called it Global Leadership Advisors, and I did a lot of work consulting back to ALA and ALU, and you know, kind of trying to help solidify a lot of that leadership work. But then eventually started to move some more into like working with, you know, projects here in the States, do a lot of innovation design kind of stuff, helping people think about new products, new revenue streams. But now, and I do some curriculum design here and there, like, you know, around leadership or design thinking work. But they're just, you know, and they are passions. They're the kinds of things that I would enjoy doing late at night, right? Like I love talking about this work. I love teaching about that kind of thing, leadership and design thinking. I enjoy that. Those are passions for me. And so those are like truly like passion side projects. But they don't amass to anything. And then there's a missing hole there for me. So it's interestingly enough, right now, one of the clients that I'm consulting with is an organization called eFacil, and they actually do a lot of consulting and coaching in relation to organizational culture, right? And I'm finding it's just like it's scratching all those itches, and not all, but so many of those itches again, which is why, Ryan, what you were sharing about like the work I did at ALA really reminds me of that, right? You know, I love that organizational building, people culture formation stuff that I think makes you know, particularly that makes mission-driven, purpose-driven organizations, live up to what they espouse to be.
Shigs, is any part of it a longing to get back to Africa?
Oh, a big part of it is. I mean, that's the miss. I mean, I can do so many things here, but if it's not Africa related or Africa connected, it's still a bit hollow. So, but again, I also recognize timing and seasons. I again, like I'm not 50 yet, so in many ways, I don't think my great masterpiece has even come yet. And so, yeah, I'm you know, focusing on my kids. Like they're my leadership academy right now, and actually, and they're humbling me incredibly. I'm getting humiliated on a daily basis, and that is developing humility in new ways that I didn't know I needed. And so I think I'm recognizing that. So, but we'll see. I mean, I think we know as a family now. Now I have to think more as a family, and this was interesting too. Like before, all those moves I made on my own. Now I have to think with my family and the interests of their development and of their passion and their purpose, and that I've had to learn that becomes a priority for me in my life. And I struggle with that. I struggle with feeling like a very big call to like help the world and, you know, the African context, and wondering like what's more, you know, what should have the greater priorities? It, you know, saving the world or like saving my kids?
Getting your kids to bed. You know?
Exactly.
Get them to eat their veggies.
I know. So first of all, there's three things I want to. So just to set up where I want to go. So, you know, we want this podcast to help people explore themselves and their passion and purpose. And so we really want to help people have like tools coming out of this. Basically, what I'd like to do is make a template that we could get in people's hands that they could download. Is kind of nice. The idea. So two things you hit on. One is this transition email that I think was really interesting. And I think it struck me as the type of thing you write when you're when you're kind of in your own head and you're stuck in your current place and you're trying to figure out how to organize your thoughts, how to activate your network that currently exists, and how to just consider what you really want to do as a next step from this place that you're in that you may not love. Could you explain to us the transition email a little more? Or are you looking it up right now?
I am. So what we do at eFacil when we transition coach, we take people through what we call a trifecta survey. the beautiful thing about this trifecta survey, again, why I love working with this organization, because this is stuff that I already believe. I did this in Impact, right? My first year out of college, my manager made us do a survey that said, what are your 3 great strengths, right? What are the 3 things you're really good at, better than anyone else in the world, right? Get other people to tell you, right? And what is it that you have like a great sense of like passion around, and then what are three jobs that relate to those things, right? And I still remember in many ways some of the stuff that people wrote, but being highly empathetic, being eclectic, those are like 2 of the strengths I remember. Relational empathy was like really high. And then I remember the roles that people said about me, like they thought I could be a museum curator, a film director, a father, a life coach, and something else. But that life coach thing has stuck with me since then, since 2004, and that's what I do now. And so,
so you wrote your own list of these things, and you asked your community to answer at all of the above, like 3 great strengths that you're better at than anyone else in the world.
Yeah.
3 things you have a passion around that they've noticed about you, and then jobs they know that relate to those passions.
Yeah. Yeah. And those passions are the strengths. Like, what could you see?
Yeah.
What could you see me being really great at with what you've now identified about me? And so that was powerful. And then basically just, I kind of knew some of that stuff already. And then I kind of put down, and what we at eFin still do now is we create a template that basically makes that into an email, right? And so you put that together. Here are my strengths, here are my passions, and here are the kind of roles that I'm looking for. If you see it, let me know, right? And that was a powerful tool, and it is still, I think, proves to be a powerful tool in a transition process.
So you basically get like 10 people to answer these as an input, and then you kind of, as the person, you assemble that, you kind of reflect on it and assemble it into your version of essentially what they gave you an input on.
Yeah.
And sort of lay out what you want. And then you send it to your even larger community and say, this is what I'm looking for. Help me out. Cool.
Yeah, the cool tool would be something that you could do on your own, right? So, eFin provides the benefit of a coach helping you think through and process through all these things. But, I've always thought about how could you make coaching self-help, right? Like you can ask the right questions to help someone think through these things. So yeah, that would be definitely one tool.
Okay. The other tool I wanted to ask about was you wrote a manifesto at ALA, and that sort of opened an opportunity within there. And I thought that was really interesting because the transition email to me sounds like when you know that where you're at isn't the right place to be and you're ready to transition somewhere. And the manifesto struck me as this is a little bit of, this is the entrepreneur who has a vision for where this place could be going, potentially has maybe even in a place of, I have nothing to lose potentially, right? Like just, I know I have a vision for what this could be and it's not realizing it. So I'm going to put forth what I see it could be. And maybe that will open a door and maybe it will close a door hard. But tell me about the manifesto and just like, what do you put in a manifesto? What's the mindset you got to be in?
I've done this in almost every organization I've been in, it seems. It's funny, while I was with a mentor of mine, talking with a mentor of mine, he actually was helping push me on my passion. He was kind of passion coaching me actually just this past week. And he always goes back to the letter I wrote to the president of Impact. And I kind of dropped the mic, and it was like one of those things that like either opened the door or it closed the door. But it's basically, it's basically all the things that you imagine this thing can be, right? Again, I'm pretty idealistic, but I had a lot of hopes and aspirations for what Impact could be. And what I tend to see is like, I can see how it's not living up to what it says it wants to be. Like, that's my thing. Like, I want you to be what you say you want to be, right? If this is what you say you want to be, like I usually always go back to your mission or something that you've put out there, that this is what you say you want to be as an organization. This is what I'm seeing, right? And oftentimes people in leadership don't get to see all the grassroots stuff. And I just usually kind of lay that out, and I usually give some examples, like this is what I see, and this is the impact that it's having. Like this is the cause, which is why I remember when we got to ALA and the people telling you about situation, impact, and behavior. I was like, I love that resonates with me because it's already been a true part of my life. And so yeah, I mean, that's kind of been, and then ultimately you remind them of who they are, right? Who they say they want to be, show them how there's like discrepancy, right? There's real dissonance that has, and I'm often worried about like the cultural implications, right? Like the long-term implications, like how this is going to harm your ability to live out your thing. And then, I usually try to throw some options out there, some solutions out there, like, do this, do that.
There's something, it's interesting you talk about that, because it's funny, because at Amazon, one of the concepts that's really common that everybody knows about is called the working backwards method. And the idea is, you, in practice, it's like, well, you think about where you want to go and you work backwards from there, or what you want to create, and then you work backwards from there. But in actual practice, what people do, and this is done all the time, is that if you want to develop something, it's encouraged to go pursue that. If you want to create a new product, I mean, it's no surprise why Amazon has so many different products. And it's a cool philosophy, which is, you write what's called a press release. It's a fake press release in the future for a product or a service or a program, and you describe what it is and how it's effective and why it's valuable. And then you also do an FAQ section that kind of fills in the gaps that the press release doesn't fill in. So it's called a PR FAQ. And this is how actually things get created and moving in Amazon, is that it's almost like a manifesto for, I want to create this. This is what it looks like in the future. And here is me answering kind of all the other questions that could possibly come up. And you present this to your manager or your leadership, and that's kind of how things get going. And if nothing else, it just kind of like helps pinpoint vision, helps pinpoint what you want to do, helps get it in writing. It helps kind of weed out bad ideas, and helps you think through all the different scenarios and ways it could go wrong. Like for example, like I've written one recently, and the idea, one of the questions is, what's the plan to globalize this? And you're like, crap, I have no idea. But there's so many little things you got to think about when you start writing it out. That's, I think, how so often things get moving.
Well, I like the FAQ part of that, because I think one of the challenges as a CEO of an organization is you get a lot of press releases from people in your company hoping that, hey, look, I got a great idea, this is what we should do, and not really thinking through anything after that, and leaving that, well, CEO, I've handed you the genius idea, I guess you'll run with it, or whatever. Yep. So I like that, because it's a good framework to help maybe someone who doesn't have a lot of experience thinking through all of the ramifications of a good idea, helps them do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's funny is like the PR part a lot of times is the normal length of a regular press release, about a page. But then the FAQ part is a lot longer than that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love it's a method, something that I'm learning myself just professionally. And the fact that you started doing that at a really young age personally it's pretty impressive. That's really cool.
Thanks. Yeah, something else that comes to mind is a tool that I like a lot that I use at ALA is it's called a strategic outcomes worksheet. It's basically like it's a theory of change logic model kind of thing. And it's basically that backwards design kind of idea. And it basically challenges you to think about 5 stages of anything, right? But that where the impact matters. And so you kind of work from your vision, or like, where the impact is, and you work through like your it's like short to medium term outcomes. Then you have outputs, which is a very important lesson that I learned, right? I learned this at Operation Hope and other places, where it's like, the numbers of what you do does not, the question was, so what, right? So what that you've had 100 people go through your seminar? So what did that actually change? What was the impact of that? And so that was a big lesson learned from that document. And so anyway, but it helps you think about that, like what's the output versus what are the short-term outcomes, and then the long-term outcomes. Then what are your inputs? What resources do you need? And then what are your daily activities? So that's a tool that I've used a lot. It's pretty helpful.
Well, we gotta hear a book recommendation at the very least.
I mean, the book that I'm reading now, or trying to read now, is Love Your Enemy. It's a really cool book that I'm liking quite a bit. It's basically about where we are as a country in our partisan divide and what it means to learn to love your enemies. And it's funny because we're actually reading it as a church, even though it's not. I think it's not. I think it might be a secular author. I don't know, but I think I like that. I like the ideas there, and I think it's pretty provocative stuff. So that's something I'm reading now. Yeah.
You recommend?
But if you're actually talking about what I would recommend for someone who's on a purpose journey, right, in search of a purpose passion, I would recommend, drum roll please, The Dream Giver.
The Dream Giver.
Yeah, I read that book when I was 20 whatever something, and it was phenomenal. It's kind of like The Alchemist.
Yeah.
But it's got a Christian perspective, but it really shaped so much, and it spoke so much to me, and it gave me so much more confidence and belief. And so I would recommend that to anybody.
I have one final question.
See,
are you passionate about bow ties?
See, that's one of those passions that fades, man. Like I used to be.
Man,
I have a collection somewhere in this house, but my current job doesn't allow me to wear it, and so I haven't worn a bow tie in maybe 2.5, 3 years or something.
You're not allowed to wear a bow tie in your current job?
Yeah, it's not that I'm not allowed. The culture of the place does not.
Got it.
And I found myself trying to assimilate into the culture there. So.
Shegs, thank you so much. This has been, I know it's late where you are, and that's not lost on us. Thank you so much for just telling this whole story. I mean, you do have quite a remarkable story, and I know that it's not over. And as you kind of keep saying, like it hasn't even gotten to the best part yet, which is a good reminder, I think, for me too, because sometimes we think that we got to do it now. We got to do it now, and just kind of recognizing that, hey, we're still in the learning phase. That's a really good reminder.
Yeah, but you're most welcome. It's a joy, and this is a passion of mine. I could do this all night and deal with the consequences tomorrow.
All right, sir. Thank you so much, Shegs. We appreciate it.
Yeah, good to meet you.
Hit that outro music.
A quick update since the recording of this episode, Shegs has since left his school job and he's joined eFacil full-time, and it's now called Unison, a company that helps with organizational transformation, leadership development, and delivering people operations solutions. He's also consulting to schools on the side about their diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. So thanks again for listening to this season of The Interesting Lives of Normal People. If you like what you heard, then we'd really appreciate giving us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts and telling your friends. It really helps new people find us. Thanks again to Hugo for letting us use her music in this episode and in this season. You can find more of her music on SoundCloud.